for coming tonight. And we're going to make a couple of announcements. One is a little housekeeping thing. One is a challenge to those of you that have ever gone on scavenger hunts. So the first one is about the videos that we have back there. Just a couple of quick points. Here's one on metamorphosis. You would not believe what goes on inside the chrysalis of a butterfly or the cocoon of a moth while it's changing from a stomach with a mouth and legs into something that, instead of eating plants, the biosystem completely changes, and now it feeds on nectar. When the butterfly is born, it's got to put its mouth parts together. It comes in 5 pieces, and they have to put it together before they can eat, drinking the nectar. They've taken MRI scans of this while it's changing, and they've got this it represented in computer graphics on this. So if you're interested in butterflies, that's one that you might want to get. This one's on flight. Some amazing internal structure examinations of hummingbirds, which have a totally different joint system in their wings compared to any other bird. And that's also available back there. These are, as I mentioned last night, are for folks who want to take something with them for the grandkids or their students who are in different types of school situations, and a way of countering the current philosophy is what it is that's being taught in science classes, okay? The next announcement is, yesterday we had these rings that were on this post go flying off, and I could only find one of them about this size, but I could not find the real shiny silver one that's about this size. So if any of the youngsters thought it was a toy and picked it up, please bring it back, because this is my backup spare, and that's the only one I've got. So I've looked everywhere and I can't find it, so I'll keep looking for it as we pack up on Wednesday night. Now, tonight's program deals with sense perception, as we mentioned. That you can't trust your senses. And we're going to open with that video clip that I neglected to show you yesterday, a good reason as to why the Apostle Paul would have used creation to introduce spiritual things to the pagans, the Athenians, the great thinkers of Greece, or to the tree worshippers that were in Lystra. Acts 17 and Acts 14. Fascinating study if you're interested. These are answers to questions that students gave on exams. Now, I know that none of the students here would answer these things like this, but just as a word of encouragement to make sure you study hard. Define filtration. The answer: to putrefy water, you use flirtation. It removes dirt, grit, and dead canoeists. Describe the 3 sections of the body, for example, the abdominal cavity. Answer: the body is consisted of 3 sections. The brainium contains the brain, the borax contains the heart and lungs, and the abominable cavity contains the 5 bowels, A, E, I, O, and U. They're creative kids. Define cesarean section. The answer: the Caesar section is a district in Rome known for its salads. And the last one is really a no-brainer. Define the word benign. Benign is what you be after you be ate. Clever kids, but those are not the right answers. We're going to show you a video clip. This one's, it's about, 4 or 5 minutes long or something. Now, we have a number of things to do tonight in different areas of science, so I have a number of short clips, but each of those is going to help us understand some aspect of science and the design and nature that I can't tell you about. It would take too long to tell you, but I can show you, okay? So this first one is what we call, well, the title is Creation Calls, and we'll show this to you, and actually my wife has has some computer files on a CD back there. If you want to take this home with you, they have them available back there. So let's turn off the room lights and see if I can get this to go. I'll expand it up there and begin.
I have felt the wind blow, whispering your name. I have seen your tears fall when I watch the rain. And how could I say there is no God when all around creation calls a singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea? Gazing at a bird in flight, soaring through the air, lying down beneath the stars, I feel your presence there. I love to stand at ocean shore and feel the thundering breakers roar, through golden fields of grain, 'neath endless blue horizons listening to a river run, watering the earth, fragrance of a rose in bloom, a newborn's cry at birth. How could I say there is no God when all around creation calls a singing bird, a mighty tree, the vast expanse of open sea? Yes, I love to stand at ocean shore and feel the thundering breakers roar, to walk through golden fields of grain, 'neath endless blue horizons frame. I believe,
Tonight's program deals with sense perception, as I mentioned. And here's your question. How do you know what you know? For example, how do you know 2 and 2 are 4? Oh, my teacher told me that. Then how does your teacher know? Well, my teacher's teacher told my teacher and told me. You know, we go on like that all evening. How do you know? Well, scientists tell us what we know through experience. We have a lot of gates to the brain. And that's why teachers always try to use as many gates as possible, tactile, auditory, visual, and that sort of thing. How do you really know? We know through our senses. We've got many wonderful senses. I could spend the whole night talking about how fantastic they are, but we only have 5 basic senses: hearing, sight, smell, taste, and touch. We used to talk a little bit about the 6th and the 7th senses, but nobody's using them anymore these days, so we kind of forget about horse and common and deal with the other 5 senses, right? And we're going to start right up at the top, the sense of hearing. Did you know that a ventriloquist can make a very good living for themselves simply because your ears cannot really tell for sure where the sound is coming from? They're sort of directional, but maybe 80 degrees or so, but not that directional. So your ears can misunderstand things. Now, it's a fantastic design, the ear. We're living in the bottom of an ocean of air. 14.7 pounds per square inch is this pressure pushing on us with air. They take a 1-inch column of air, go from sea level up to space where there is no air, and if you were to weigh that column, it would be 14.7 pounds. So there can be many hundreds of pounds of pressure pushing on you, but it's pushing out and it's pushing in, so everything's kind of balanced. But your eardrum can pick up a sound when it moves no more than half the diameter of a hydrogen atom. That's incredible. It can detect a change of pressure of 1/30,000th of an atmosphere. That would be equivalent to taking a piece of saran wrap and slicing it laterally into many thin sheets a few molecules thick, laying that molecular sheet of saran wrap on the floor, and then going next to that high tower of saran wrap, 3 or 4 or 5 molecules thick, and then stepping on it. You are now high enough for your ear to pick up the difference. Change of altitude. That's amazing. Your heat sensors in the body can detect a change of temperature of 5,000ths of a degree. Not bad, this upright carbon-based bipedal bag of ambulatory protoplasm that we're living inside of. And it's a living machine capable of fixing itself pretty much if you take care of it. But these sensors are unreliable for accurate scientific information, all right? Even though the ear is pretty amazing, we miss a lot of things with our ears, just like we do with our eyes. We'll talk about our eyes a little bit later. In fact, I have a device here that we can place on your ears, and you can actually listen to what you say as you say it. And I talked to a few people before the program. If they'd come up now, let's have a little test with our ears, all right? I have a male and, 2 males and a female. Let's get this thing rolling here. And gentlemen, if you would stand over here, and we'll take ladies first. Just make sure you don't touch anything or bump anything. Okay, ma'am, right over here. You are the lady of the night. Right in front of the microphone. I'll bring this thing out so we can get a little closer there like that. And that's whoa!
Got me relaxed now.
What do you guys do here? Just move over that way a little bit. You okay, ma'am? Oh, okay. Maybe for this demonstration, if you would stand as close to the floor as possible, please. Yeah, thank you very much. Don't be nervous. Okay, half a step over that way, because that's the microphone. I want you to talk into that. Oh, it better not. I think I'll get that fixed. I thought I had it fixed last night. Let me see if that's... Okay, I think we're okay. Folks, keep an eye on these 2 guys, would you? Okay, now let me get this out of the way for a minute. Here, a pair of earphones. I want you to put the earphones on if you would. Now plug these things in. We'll get the wires behind your ear. Don't mess up your wig there, okay?
I didn't hear you.
I didn't say anything, did I? Just don't hit me. Okay, now, can you hear me all right?
A little bit.
A little bit. How's that?
Good.
Good, very good. Okay, now, I want you to give us your name and your favorite food. Let's do that.
My what?
Your name.
Yeah.
Okay.
What else?
And your favorite food, like a dessert or main course or whatever.
I'm Sandy McCauley.
Okay.
What else did you say? I'm curious with this.
Your favorite food.
My favorite food. Chicken.
That's good. Okay, great. Now, let me put this here, turn this on like this. That's there like that. Okay. Do you have any poetry for us? Poetry like, how about Mary Had a Little Lamb? Remember that one?
Sure.
Good.
And little lamb.
Good. Go through the whole thing.
Oh, I don't know the whole thing. I'm old.
Okay. Okay, try.
It's white as snow.
Yeah.
And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
No, not bad, not bad. Okay. You just sort of had that kind of surprised look on your face. That's a pretend story, so, it didn't really happen. Mary Had a Little Lamb, the doctors were surprised too, obviously. Right? She's not surprised. Of course, when old MacDonald had a farm, they nearly lost their mind, on that one, but they're just pretend stories. So what I want you to do, go through the whole thing all the way to the end. So, yes, the lamb part. We got to find out where the fleece went, so go right through it.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. Followed her to school one day, it was against the rule, and I don't remember the rest.
Well, that's not bad. That's a lot further than most people got. Let me check the ears. Listen carefully. No wonder you couldn't hear me. Let's take those off. Let me check them again, because they should be making a... That's weird. I don't hear a thing. There, that's set there. This is... Okay, okay. Try that. No, it should be... How strange. Maybe my earphones are... Tell you what, I'll put these on and see what happens. Mary had a little lamb, its fleeces. I don't hear a thing. Well, that's disgusting. This is one thing. Oh, I wonder if somebody... I've got so many wires back here, but this thing was working before, so we may... Will you folks be here tomorrow night? Because this normally works, but this is the first time I've had it not work. Yeah, I'm dead as a doornail. I'll have to fix that tonight. Sorry for making you walk all the way up here, but give me a hand anyway, folks. They tried. That's very strange. The first time in 41 years that hasn't worked. So, well, I'll work on it tonight, and maybe we can get that going. But what I want you to remember, tomorrow night, get that kid's name. So it's not the earphones. Very interesting. Okay, well, thanks for the attempted rescue, Steve. Okay. Well, it's a mystery to me, but we take along a toolkit, and this stuff is built out of space hardware, as I mentioned the other day, and it took about 8.5 years before I've had the first problem. Bouncing on the road and freezing winters and hot summers and all. And all it was a beta of a transistor. A driver transistor was dropping below the minimum level. And so I just traced it down on the computer and replaced it, and everything worked fine until tonight. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. We can't trust our ears. At least I'm suggesting we can't. I'll get that. I'll work on it tomorrow. What about sight? Last night we told you that the eye has a phenomenon known as persistence of vision. It takes about 1/7 of a second for the chemicals to be used up. Remember from last night, for those chemicals to be used up, and your eye keeps sending a message to the brain during that 1/7 of a second, even though the lights are off. So your brain thinks the lights are on during that time. And a prestidigitationist, which would be a fast-fingered artist, presto digits, fast fingers, an illusionist or a magician, they can move their hands so fast it will appear as though things are coming into existence right in thin air. And this video clip we have will verify. It's only a couple of minutes long. Let's check this out. I think you'll enjoy it. I love watching illusionists.
How's he doing this?
Hi YouTube, click the button below if you want to see more of Britain's incredible talent and if you want to subscribe to the channel. Go on, you know you want to.
I love their accent. I want you to hear it. Okay. Okay, we'll come back to some more of that, dealing with cell structure and such later on. But again, these eyes, you cannot trust these eyes. And illusionists take advantage of that. But many people often tell me, well, if I can see it, I'll believe it. But that's not the right answer. When you were a child, a little baby, newborn baby, did you know that you saw the world upside down first time you're born? Maybe it has to do with gravity or something, but at some point in time in that infant's life, matter hours or days or maybe week, I don't know, the brain takes the upside down image and flips it over. You have a convex lens in your eye, a single convex lens. An image passing through a convex lens will be inverted once. All right? Every time light hits a new media, the new media, the air, liquid, dense gas, lighter gas, thicker oil, mineral oil, whatever. It's refracted. It will run straight through the medium, and then when it passes to another density of the object, hot or cold water, for example, it's refracted again, second time, and then we'll go straight until it hits a new density barrier. And everything you see is upside down and backwards initially, but at some point in the infant's life, the brain turns that over. And we wanted to show that to the scientific community. Our founder of the Moody Institute of Science, where I began these programs, taking over for Dr. Speak, who is my predecessor, he had a pair of goggles built that flip the image before it gets to your eye, and then your eye flips it one more time. So he was seeing everything upside down and backwards at first when he wore the goggles. But after 7 or 8 days, his brain took that data and flipped it over, and he could see fine, like you and I do right now. Now, he wasn't sure if this would happen. So he kind of took a chance, but he was curious. He was a science type guy, and to show that he'd actually had this reverse take place when he could see normally with the goggles, he drove a motorcycle on a desert dry lake. He flew an aircraft, made an instrument approach to Los Angeles International Airport. And if you are pilots, when you're vectored in on the final approach, you've got your marker beacons out there, and you control your altitude with the throttle. If you can't read those instruments, sometimes it's just 1 or 2 degrees that you have to change your approach. There's no way that you could have landed that aircraft if everything was upside down and backwards. So his brain actually learned to do that. And we've got these goggles here. He wore these things for a couple of weeks. He lived about 3.5 blocks from the research lab and put these goggles on when he woke up in the morning, and then he would walk to work. Coming to a street, instead of stepping off the curb and walking across the street, everything was upside down. So there he was doing the stork mating dance, trying to find this step to go up in the sky. Then he realized, oh no, it's okay, it's a step, I gotta go down. So he gets halfway across the street. He looks kind of weird wearing these things. Some car honks at him and he ducks. Whoa, a flying car, how'd they do that? The thing's going through the sky. And then he gets to the office. He needed help just to sit down at the office. Because everything was upside down and backwards. And I asked him one time when we had lunch together, when did the flip occur, when things got back to normal? And he said, he woke up one morning, put the goggles on, and his wife Margaret brought some hot tea to him, and he looked at it, and the table was upside down, stuck to the ceiling. The cup was upside down, and the hot water vapor was swirling down. And he said to himself, that's impossible. And boom, everything flipped at that point. And that's when he was doing the thing with the motorcycle and the plane. But what do you suppose happened when he took the goggles off? Everything went upside down and backwards again, just like a newborn babe. And it took a few more days to get back to normal. Now, we do have these goggles with us, and we need an athletic type, male type person. You verify you're an athlete. The guy in the stripes had your hand up first with a light and white. You're going, okay, come on up here, pal. Let's test this out. Okay, you stand right here. Look out that way. And we'll put these on. As long as you don't throw up on me here. Okay, they sort of comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay, look down at your toes and tell me which way your toes are pointing.
There.
You're not looking at your toes. Look at your toes. Which way do your toes point? Look down at your toes. Maybe these don't work either. I don't know. Which way do your toes appear to be pointing? Oh, backwards, I see. Now, okay. That must hurt. Now, let's go over this way a few steps, okay? Right over here. Now, you turn this way and face me. I'm going to go across the stage a little bit. I want you to focus on my eyes. Remember, left is right, right is left, and up is down. Everything's backwards, okay? So I'm going to move, and I want you to follow me with your eyes. Ready? Hello? Okay, I'm going to move, and you follow me. Here we go. Whoops. No, remember, everything's backwards, okay? Try it again. Look into my eyes. No. We don't have anti-grav yet. Let's go to the beach, okay? Go to the beach. I'm going to toss the beach ball at you. I want you to catch it, okay? How's that? All right, here we go. Oh, that was close. He just went the wrong way. Okay, try it again. Let's use a bigger ball this time. You ready? Okay, here it comes. Oh, not bad. Not bad. Let's try it again. It's not going to come slow. No, you can't catch a big beach ball with just one hand. Okay? I'll get way back here, so give you a lot of time to get ready for it. Okay? Here it comes. Let's try it again. No. We're not doing so good. Tell you what, let's make it real simple. I'm going to put it on the floor. All right? Now, it's not going to move. It's just right over here on the floor. If I can get it to hold still. Okay? So it's going to stay right there. Can you see it? Good. Now, I want you to draw an imaginary line between the beach ball and your toes. You look down on the ground, see that there's nothing in front of you except the floor. Okay? All right? Now your toes are lined up with the ball. So what I want you to do is walk toward the beach ball, putting heel to toe, like you're walking a tightrope. See, not the plank, but a tightrope. Okay? But keep your eyes on your toes so they follow that imaginary line. Keep your eyes on your toes, heel to toe, and go over and pick up that beach ball. Watch your toes, not the wall. Where are your toes? Are you seeing your toes? Watch your toes. Pick up the beach ball. Very good, very good. Okay. You're done now, kid. Throw it to me. I'm right here. Not too bad. Give me a hand, folks. Good job. Here's a prize. You come and pick one of these things out. We got another flip book for you. Michael Mouse's Christmas Carol, Pocahontas or whatever that's called. Some kind of a, you got, okay, good for you. Thanks again, good job, good job. So, we really can't trust our eyes. In fact, let's do something like the illusionists might do. This disc, when it gets up to speed, is going to be spinning at about 1,000 RPM. So the edge is going over 300 miles an hour. All those spots just fading out to a blur. I'm going to turn off the room lights and turn another source on. Whoa. How'd that happen? Now I've got a way of controlling the flash rate on that strobe there. What's happening here? We got a lot of people here tonight. Let's pass a few spots around. Now, we didn't slow it down. It's still spinning real fast, okay? And if I ever give away too many spots, I just collect them again. This strobe light is only on for 10 millionths of a second. But the flash is so bright that your eye continues to send it to the brain for about 1/7 of a second. And your brain thinks the lights are on pretty much the entire time. You see it flickering, but off the surface of the disc, it doesn't seem to be flickering. Now, to help us understand what's involved, I have a little friend on the back side of the disc I'd like you to see. And it will help us understand how they used to make cartoons when they had to draw the pictures. He looks a little odd, but as I mentioned last night, he comes from California, the land of fruits and nuts, you know. They dress weird out there sometimes. Let's get up to speed again, and I'll turn the lights off. Let's turn the strobe on, and you'll see how this works. As the speed increases, it still will only turn on when that guy's left leg is up, like his knee pointing out like that, see? That's the only time the light's on. So the disc spins all the way around in the dark, and the light is fired and triggered when that one guy gets to the bottom. But we can do the same thing by shifting positions where the light is firing. We've got 12 different figures in different positions as he is appearing to walk. Now we can make it happen faster. Looks like he's walking around the disc. Principle of animation, the way they made those old cartoons. Okay? Or I could change the frequency of light flashing, make them go backwards too. All because of that persistence of vision. So we have a lot of fun with that. And of course the old cartoon systems that they used to do. We really can't trust our eyes. Well, somebody says, you know, maybe I can trust my eyes. I've had them checked, they're fine. But I mean, you left the lights off for a long time there. In fact, the lights were off for about 2 minutes on each side of the disc, and that strobe was only on for a total of 1/2 of 1 second. But your eye stretched the flash out. So we were doing a lot of things in the dark, and this one guy that was talking about this said, yeah, maybe I can trust my eyes. All right, let's leave the lights on this time for any of you that are skeptical about this. And I'm going to rely on your background experience maybe to cause some questions about what's really happening. That object up there is not a window, right? The ends are parallel, but the top and the bottom are not parallel. What would you call that shape? It's a special form of a rectangle, but it's not rect. It's what? Well, it starts with the letter T. Trapezoid, right. That's a trapezoid. Just like the base of this unit. It's a trapezoid. Okay? Top and bottom are parallel. In this case, the sides are parallel, but the top and the bottom are not. Now, I've painted some shadows on it. Let me get that out of the way for you. I'll show you the other side here. It's painted the same way on both sides. Okay? I've cut these holes in it, and the shadows, it makes it look like a window, just a thin piece of metal. It's got a counterweight out here, but it's about 1/16 of an inch thick. Okay? I'm going to turn that on and turn it around very slowly, the same way all the time. It'll just keep going around. But when that small edge goes by, whoa. What's happening? Here comes that larger edge. That looks normal. But what's happening now? It's going back the other way. This looks normal. Now, let me give you a reference point so you have something to focus on a little better here. Okay, that block of wood, that's fixed to a piece of steel wire, and there's a little hole drilled in that counterbalance, so it'll stay there. Can't move. Let's turn it on again. Watch carefully. The Again, we have no problem with that edge. But look, no hands. There it goes. You know, if that so-called window goes one way, the block floats off all by itself when it comes around. But it's fixed on the edge. How can it do that? Here it goes again. Let me give you another reference point. Here's a rigid aluminum pipe. Okay, I've got a slot cut in it here, so I can mount this right through the edge of that mullion right there. Okay, now we got extra reference points. We'll turn it on again. Let's watch it again. So we got these extra references. Watch carefully. Here we go. Whoa. That's worse. What's happening here, this was designed by Dr. Adelbert Ames. It's called the Ames window after his work. He wanted to show the tenacious hold that your brain had over your sense of reason. When we look at something that looks familiar, your brain goes into its background experience to help you figure out what you're looking at. And it uses what it's learned to do that. So you come to conclusions based upon your background experience, what you've been taught, what you've experienced. And architects in our country build windows with 90-degree corners and parallel sides. So when we see something that looks like a window, it looks like it's in perspective, like we're standing near the closest edge, and the far edge is kind of sloping down to the vanishing point in perspective. So your brain locks onto that assumption that it's a window, even though I told you it wasn't. And then when this thing turns around, the way it's painted and the shape, your brain would think that it's oscillating back and forth like that, because that's what windows would do if this were a window. It would seem like it's doing that. And every time it goes backwards, what does your brain allow to happen with that block that's stuck on the end? Well, your brain knows it's a window, even though I told you it wasn't. So your brain overrides your reason and allows this thing to float by itself, connects up on the backside, comes back around, and then you go off into la-la land, you know, this thing floats away, and you're perfectly happy letting it float away because you're not going to give up that preconceived notion about windows with 90-degree corners. And that pipe going through the middle makes it worse. We had these programs at Thule Air Force Base in northern Greenland a number of years ago. While we were there, the psychologist on base told us that they had taken a demonstration like this to the Eskimos living in northern Greenland. And while they were there, they set this demonstration up under ideal conditions. Nice long hallway with black velvet draped along the back. And then they told the Eskimos, okay, this is not a window. And they said, okay, it's not a window, fine. They turned it on, and to the Eskimos, it just kept going around in a circle. It wasn't going back and forth at all. And the scientist said, now, are you sure you realize this is not a window? They said, yeah, it's not a window. Okay, so they put the block in. They didn't see anything weird. They put the pipe through the middle, turned it on, and just kept going around in a circle. And those scientists now, are you sure you realize this is not a window? And they says, right already, you know, we've never seen a window before in our lives, you know, whatever you guys say. And they realized what had happened. They had nothing in their background and their experience that would confuse them about something that had a weird shape to it. And, you know, they said, okay, it's not a window, it's not a window, and they had no problem. But because of our culture and the way we're taught things, sometimes we're taught not to question the authority, right? You know, somebody in a white coat in a lab or something, 9 dentists out of 10, this is the best toothpaste in the world, you know. And they got actors playing the part, you know. That white coat thing, people accept authority and it's accept what their statements is true. But question everything. And have people substantiate things. If you're not sure about the background or what they said, have them verify it, that kind of thing. Shapes. Shapes can, in fact, your eye, you have all kinds of sensors feeding your brain. Your eye even does a lot of pre-processing. They found this with cats, research on cats. A cat's eye will not trigger if it sees a sphere moving from the lower right to the upper left. But if that same sphere moves from the upper left to the lower right, the nerve triggers and sends a signal to the brain. There's a difference of contrast of 2.4, 2.5 to 1. Under that, your brain doesn't pick it up. But some cultures can. That's why Eskimos can come down into the southern continent and they can pick out people in the woods that you or I would not see because they have very acute contrast sensors in their eye. That's why animals can often see people in the woods where you didn't think you would be visible because the shape is wrong for the environment, the contrast is wrong. So your eye can do a lot of pre-processing. There are horizontal lines that your eye will not trigger on unless they're moving. And they would have to move from the lower to the upper or from the upper to the lower, or certain angles. So it's amazing the processing going. In fact, I can demonstrate this, well, not demonstrate it, but I can have you experience it. I'm going to ask you a question in about 17 seconds. And I don't think any of you have thought of this for a while. But concentrate carefully and think back to when you first came in the room up until now. How many of you have thought about how your socks feel on your feet right now? Oh, wasn't even thinking about socks, no? Because after your brain senses something for a while, it turns that sensor off and goes to other things that are more critical. Now you can, now that I've told you about it, some of you are wiggling your toes and you're feeling your socks, right? But up until that point, you didn't even think about it. So there, you know, it's just a way of keeping your brain from getting overloaded with data. And a lot of this happens in the medulla oblongata at the base of the brainstem there. And that control, that's the last thing that stops functioning. It controls the heart rate and the breathing and such. So you can be totally unconscious and not even thinking about it, and your breathing just keeps on going, okay? So we can't trust these eyes. And people take advantage of that. That's why police officers need multiple witnesses for an accident, because everyone sees something a little differently. And so they'll ask you to repeat the story many, many times, and maybe some new data comes out that you hadn't thought about because your eye might have passed over this. But our background experience is very critical. And depending upon what we've learned or experienced, that is how we're going to see things and interpret things. And it may not be right, what we're thinking about or how we're interpreting things. So, and of course the other senses, the sense of taste and touch. You know, you have a cold, you don't taste things very well. Technically, you would mean that you don't smell the food very well, because you can only recognize 4 distinct flavors: sweet, salt, bitter, and sour. Most of that experience, 85% of it, is odor. So when you have a cold, you know, things just don't taste right. Well, they don't give you all the senses that you would have if you were to be able to smell it as well. Touch. You know, those senses are unreliable for accurate scientific information. And some equipment is unreliable sometimes too. I'll really try to get that going, because it's a fun experiment. And if you folks are going to be back tomorrow, I'll bring it back up again. Now, if we can't trust our senses, what are some of the things that we can trust? You know, if we can't... If the senses are unreliable, where are you going to put your faith and trust? Well, what about the laws of nature? Things that are consistently active in this creation realm. I can take this ring and toss the ring up in the air. Immediately God's law takes effect. It begins to slow down 32 feet per second, reaches 0 speed, and then begins to accelerate again. Well, somebody say, what do you mean God's law? They told me in my physics class that was Newton's law. Well, did this law work before Newton ever discovered it? Of course it did. He's the first one intelligent who gave us the formulas. S equals 1/2 gt squared, and the difference of velocity squared equals 2as, and F equals ma, and things like that. But if I were to adjust a selector switch here, and then place this ring over that post, and let go, what's going to happen? It's going to fall. And what force is doing that? Gravity. And gravity works every time there's masses involved. Okay? Even out in space, gravity works. It's reduced when you have the Earth influence far enough away, but gravity between two objects, even humans and a tool, will be drawn to each other because of the mass, unless you give it a little push and lose the tool. One of our astronauts dropped a tool or something up there in space, and the thing went floating off, some kind of a wrench or something. Now, if I can negate the force will still be active here, but I can overcome that force with an electromagnetic field of energy by stepping on the switch and dropping the ring. Now that metal ring is floating. I can turn off the force and the ring falls. Somebody says, I don't see any forces. Well, you may not see the force, but the force is still there. We'll talk about that on the last night when we talk about matter and transdimensional transport and phase dynamics and how that ring could and should go right through the floor, but it doesn't. So we don't see any forces. Maybe we don't have to see the force. And by the way, guys, look for that little silver ring. This one's a little smaller, floats a little higher. These are non-magnetic rings. Turn the force off, it falls. Turn the force back on, and it flies. Okay? Now, if Newton were sitting on the front row this evening and he saw this thing float like that, to Newton, he would be witnessing a miracle. But I built the thing. It's no miracle. We have 60 hertz alternating current wrapped into 214 turns of number 12 round wire. That current is building up and collapsing an electromagnetic field 120 times every second. There's a soft iron core inside of this polyvinyl tube, and that core is conducting the Gaussian field up here. So you get these loops of force going through this coil like that. You place a closed conductor like this non-magnetic aluminum ring into a field like that. This becomes a one-turn shorted secondary. It's like a transformer. Whenever it's moving in a field, that energy is coupled into a conductor, and you get current flowing in the conductor. Being its opposite in phase, the energy will be repelling here, and this thing floats like that. Everybody knows that. Big deal. But I'm not changing God's laws when that thing doesn't fall. No, I'm superimposing another one of God's laws concerning electromagnetic fields and the opposition of the field. And that ring will always float like that. It wasn't a miracle. In fact, you hear the story about some Bible scholar at a liberal college was walking across campus, and he heard these strange words. Go get him, God, a miracle happened, and he says, correct this little kid here. So he goes over, and here's this young man, freshman, sitting under a tree reading the Bible. And he's reading in Exodus where Moses led the Israelis across this water and parted the sea and all that. And the professor says, no, young man, you got to realize that was known as a sea of reeds, and there are probably no more than 6 inches of water there. That was no miracle. And the young guy thought, oh, wow, okay, yeah, well, thank you. I came to this school to find out what the Bible says, and thank you. So the professor is very self-satisfied. He walks away, and just as he gets over the hill, he hears those words again. A miracle happened. Go get him, God. And so he turns around and goes back, and he says, now, son, I told you that. This was no miracle. And the young man says, yes, sir, I realize that. There was probably no miracle and no more than 6 inches of water, but a miracle happened. Pharaoh's entire army drowned in 6 inches of water. You see what we can do sometimes when we dismiss something that the Bible clearly states that was unusual that happened? God can use the laws of nature, or he can superimpose his power over that and suspend that law for a while. Suppose you were a creator, and you created a planet, and it had some sort of people on it, and you watch these people for a while, and you say, they're kind of interesting. I'd love to see what happens when I stir up the nest a little bit. So this creator goes over to a big wall that controls the gravity on that planet, and hits the switch, turns off gravity for about 10 minutes. What would happen if gravity were turned off for about 10 minutes on our planet? Anybody? Any ideas? Remember, the Earth is rotating from west to east about 1,000 miles an hour on its axis. So if gravity were turned off, the Earth would continue to rotate underneath you, and you would go flying off into space. And after about 10 minutes, you would be 6,000 feet up in the air. So what would happen if this creator turned the switch back on again? We wouldn't have our parachutes on that day, would we? And it's not the fall. Enjoy the fall all the way down. It's a sudden stop at the bottom that kind of wrecks things. My dad always told me, we did some skydiving when I was crazy and younger. And he said, just enjoy the fall, enjoy the fall. Just make sure you don't stop too fast at the bottom. Gravity is always working, always working. It's one of the laws of nature, consistent thing that they can study and reproduce the effects and all. How many of you ride motorcycles? I don't see many motorcycles. I see a lot of motorcycles in California. About every day or two we have motorcycles getting hit by cars and such out there in the freeways. But if you're riding a motorcycle, the person driving that machine, when you come into a turn, what do they tell you to do? Lean into the turn with the driver, because they are relying on your mass and their mass to help direct the forces that are generated when that wheel is spinning around real fast. Now they call it centrifugal force, but technically, some people say, well, there's not really a technical thing of centrifugal force, but there's an effect of what happens here. You get a wheel spinning up. Once it gets up to a certain speed, it's going to be generating a force, it seems, and it will want to maintain a fixed orientation in space, in the plane that it was generated in. So if you have a wheel spinning like this is the plane, so you can move it forward or backward, up or down. But if you try to twist it out of its plane of orientation by turning the handlebars, for example, there's going to be another force that comes into play. Starts with the letter P. It's called the precessionary force. And that force will operate at 90 degrees perpendicular to the axis of rotation. So if the wheel is spinning like this, the axis of rotation is in this direction. Perpendicular to that is where that force is going to activate if you start twisting it out of its plane of orientation. Now, we have a real buff young man here tonight. Okay? I asked a lot of people in the audience, I want the toughest dude here tonight. They said, well, they all gave me the same name. The first guy, they said, he's not here, but this guy's a tough dude. So, and he's out there somewhere. Jeremiah, would you come down here a minute? You'll see. Okay, thank you. Now this is not well, it's a little heavy, but it's a little awkward. So I'm going to bring it out. You stand out here in the center of the platform, and I'll carry this thing out. What I want you to do is pick up the suitcase by the handle and turn it all the way around. Anytime now. Turn it all the way around. Thank you, Jeremy. Very good. Very good. Okay. Excellent. Now, what I want you to do is lay it down on this side, flat on the floor, on that side. Very good. Okay. Now, stand over here, get a good grip. No, over there, because I want you to grab that handle down there, okay? With both hands, so you can, because I don't want you to let go of this thing. I want you to move it up to waist level without turning it. Move it nice and fast and keep it flat, just right up to the waist, and keep.
Touching the side.
Yeah, you got to hang on to that handle because it'll rip right out of your hands. No, don't turn it, Jeremy. Pull it straight up, and no, don't turn it, Jeremy. Where are you going with that? Okay. Okay, face this end toward the back wall. That end, perpendicular to the back wall, right there. Now, where are you going with it? The back wall. Now it's going this way. Yeah, ride 'em, cowboy. Okay. Yeah. We could have an accident here if you're not careful, you know. Okay. Lay down on that side. Flat on the side. Good job. Give me a hand. Good job, folks. Thank you, Jeremy. Oh, my. Now, you know what? You realize what's involved in it. I've got a large steel wheel. It weighs maybe 40, 50 pounds. And I didn't have any trouble when I picked it up and carried it out here because I kept it in the same plane of orientation. And I could go forward or backward, up or down. But when I asked Jeremy to turn that around, he started turning it, and then the precessionary force pushed from the side. It wasn't active until then. Lifted it up on its side. This would be what they call gyroscopic rigidity. It's always going to stay like this. And they build these things for aircraft in the early days. Nowadays they have these electronic units, but in the early days they had a beryllium sphere suspended on a field, and the chamber was evacuated. So this beryllium ball, in fact, I even met the scientist that built this thing, and it spins very, very fast, but once it's energized at the end of the runway, the aircraft is still, and then they let that spin up, and then when they take off, the cage on the outside of that beryllium sphere will rotate as the aircraft accelerates and moves up into the sky. It might bank left or right, but the ball spinning stays in its original orientation. But the cage on the outside moves. And there's a computer that detects the change of degree as this cage is moving. The aircraft may fly over this way and then go up again, higher altitude. Over Nam, they had these kinds of units in the F-4 Phantoms. And that was an aircraft. The thing could get all shot up. And the pilot could engage that return flight. The computer will retrace its flight path based upon the positional changes. And many of those pilots were saved by getting back to their air base, and they could land this thing. Sometimes they didn't make it, though, because the aircraft was so shot up and lost the hydraulics or whatever. But they rely on that consistency of this centrifugal force, momentum, inertial guidance, and all that kind of thing going on. And all these laws in nature are fixed and certain and sure. We have a chemistry experiment. I talked to a young lady over here that's likes chemistry. If she would come up now, please. And let's do a chemistry reaction and check out the chemical laws in this. All right? This flask has a liquid in it, and to the liquid I've added some I-205. Do you remember what that is? Good for you. I is iodine, and O is oxygen, right. I-205, diiodide pentoxide. 2 iodines, 5 oxygens, diiodide pentoxide, okay? When you add that to water, you end up shifting a few molecules around, you end up with HiO3, which is iodic acid. So, I want you to wear this, and if you would stand over here and hang on to this flask, I'll take the stopper off. Okay? Now I'm going to put these on because I don't trust you. Okay? Now, in this actually this is a reagent bottle. I have water, and then there's starch in the bottom. So let's mix up the starch. Starch and iodine will indicate each other's presence. Starch is the indicator for the presence of free iodine, okay? But I have added some sulfurous acid, H2SO3, to this solution. And the sulfurous acid is going to block the reaction from taking place. There should be a color change once they detect each other. But it won't be instantaneous because I've got that acid in there. So I'm going to measure out enough acid for about, let's try for a 30-second delay. Okay, this won't blow up. Of course, nothing else seems to be working right, so I can't promise you anything. Let's try and see. Okay, let's get up here to we'll have this initial volume we'll start with. This will be kind of our reference point. Okay. When you swirl this thing, because what you got to hang on to it with both hands. When you swirl this, go around and around like this, right? Keep your hand under there, and you just don't go up and down. There's a big hole up in the top. Okay, just checking. Okay, and I'll recycle my watch, make sure that's working, and it is, and stop it and back to 0. Okay. Now, let me get the acid ready. Okay, now you hang on. Now start swirling it around. Just a minute. Okay, when you swirl this, you don't need to go like this. Okay? While your dress was shaking there, I thought maybe. See, it's all in the wrist motion. See, watch this. See, I'm not gonna do this. Okay, watch this. Okay? Okay. Then I'm going to hang on to it, and let me get the watch ready. Don't do it. Don't do it yet. Oh, yeah, very good, very good. Okay. Okay, now hold still. Boom, the acid's in and the watch is going. Okay, swirl around. Now don't fight me, lady. Go around this way. Okay, hold still, hold still, hold still. You get the acid out here so you don't burn your hands. And you swirl it around some more. I'm going to stand over here in case it blows up. I'll run for help, see? Okay? Okay, hold it real still out in front of you so everybody can see. Real still. Thank you. 20. Whoa, 21 seconds. I'm impressed. 21 seconds. Well, we were aiming for 30. That means we missed it by about 9 seconds.
What's it going to do?
Well, it turned color, you see. Oh, you see. It's 9. No. It's 9 seconds. See, we wanted to get closer to 30. So if we missed by 9 seconds, that means we were using about 1.3 cc's per second. Because they started with 30 cc's. Now, is this reaction directly proportional or inversely proportional? Inversely, you're right. Yeah. So that means if we wanted to go longer, we'd add less acid. Okay, so let's try it. We missed it by 1.3 per second. By 9 times 1.3 would be that much. You're right. Define the word benign. Okay. So we multiplied 9 seconds times 1.3. So 9 times 1 would be 9, and 9 times 0.3 is 2.7. Okay, and you add that together, 9 and 2.7 would be 9, 10, 11.7. 11.7, so about 12. So we'll try it, and less because it's inversely. So we start, so it should be somewhere close to 20, 18, 19 cc somewhere. So let's try that. We'll try to go in the right direction anyway. Okay. 19.314. That's close enough for me? Okay. Now, let me reset the watch back to 0. Oh, no, don't swirl because it's already been changed. I'll give you another flask, the same concentration because it came from the same batch. You hold on to that one. And let me get the watch ready and the acid ready. And we'll try to make it go a little longer this time with less acid, okay? Start swirling. Okay, hold still. Boom, the acid's in and the watch is going. Could go around like that. Okay, now hold still. I'm going to get this thing out of here again and get out of the way. Okay, hold it out in front of you so everybody sees, and we'll count the seconds off, and let's watch it this time. It should go longer. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, good, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 28.5. You got closer than I did. Good job. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, you can, if you ran a photocell through that, you could split 1/10 of a second with this reaction. Now, we missed it one time by, wow, a lot more than we did today. It was over in Vietnam. I mean, the water we were using looked like chocolate milk. You know, it could have been some impurities in the water, maybe. But using pure water and with a clock and a photo switch, and when that thing turns dark like that, it'll turn off the clock in 1/10 of a second. And you can plot the curve according to temperature and concentrations and all that. And this thing is always going to work because it follows one of those chemical laws established in nature. If there were not chemical laws, there would be chaos. We would never know what would be happening. There are a lot of clear liquids that are poisonous, right? A lot of invisible gases. You cannot detect natural gas. They have to put a very odorous agent in the gas for you to know that there's a leak. All right? So there are gases that are invisible, very poisonous. Laws of nature, very specific and fixed. And the same kind of chemical things go on in your body. And without those chemical reactions and without what are called enzymes they act like catalysts. An enzyme is a very complicated protein structure, three-dimensional protein structure that helps a chemical reaction take place. For example, if you were to burn wood or paper pulp, you've got to raise the temperature to 451 Fahrenheit. If you raised your body temperature to 451 to oxidize cellulose and stuff, you'd burn up, right? But you've got enzymes inside your body that can keep the temperature down to 98.6 degrees. And many, many accelerators in the body, these catalysts that help the things over the energy hump, so to speak, and get the reaction to occur at much more quickly than normal or at lower temperatures and all that sort of thing. Dr. Belinsky was once asked, you know, comparing a cell to something, how complicated is a cell? And he said it's as complicated as a galaxy. Everything working just right. Someone asked another scientist, what did Darwin think a cell was? And he said, it was a world that Darwin could not even comprehend. Very, very complex. And we've got some interesting video clips to show you some of what goes on inside the cell that we just take for granted. There are some enzymatic reactions that without the catalyst, this very specific protein, it would take 1.3 trillion years before this reaction would happen by just random chance because of the energies involved and that sort of thing. But in the body, it happens in thousandths of a second. Let's check one of these out. First inside the cell, and then some of the machines inside the cell we'll talk about. This first one is called the workhorse of the cell.
Cells are full of specialized components that perform functions vital to their existence. But how do these components get to the right locations inside the cell to perform their functions? For larger components, a transportation system is needed. Meet the kinesin, masterpieces of microengineering Kinesins are miniature motorized machines that carry cargo from one part of the cell to another, walking along self-assembling highways called microtubules. Known as the workhorses of the cell, kinesins have 2 feet, or globular heads, that literally walk 1 foot over another along the microtubule, pulling their cargo to its destination. Each foot possesses 2 special locations called binding sites that interact with other molecules. One site attaches to the microtubule and the other binds with ATP, the energy molecule of the cell. When one foot binds with ATP and uses its energy, the foot flips over, resulting in the walking motion. Each foot has a short neck which is connected to a strand of a long coiled stalk. At the end of the stalk is a fan-shaped tail which holds tightly to the cargo being transported. Kinesins can carry cargo that are many times their own size. Sometimes a kinesin is in danger of getting stuck on the microtubule highway because of blockages caused by other cellular components. To get around such obstacles, multiple motor proteins may be used to carry a single piece of cargo, together providing enough force to break free. Kinesins typically walk away from the center of the cell and toward the cell's periphery. The kinesin's 2 feet work together efficiently, with 1 foot holding fast to the microtubule, while the other releases itself and takes a step forward. This coordinated stepwise movement allows kinesin motors to walk as many as 100 steps per second, moving about 8 nanometers with each step. When not carrying cargo, kinesins can shift to energy-saving mode to conserve fuel until their next job. The kinesin plays a vital role in many cellular processes, not just transporting materials, but also aiding cell replication. The walking kinesin molecular machine, another example of intelligent design.
Those of you young people, there's a big future in computer science and nanomachine design. They're getting a lot of information out of nature, how to build these things. Now here's something that we talked about the other day.
The innermost workings of how a simple code is turned into flesh and blood.
Okay? This deals with the replication of the DNA code. Let me introduce it this way. You have about 100 trillion cells in your body, and each of them has about 6 feet of DNA in it. They used to think that since we're only using about 3%, 4% of the DNA, which is where the chromosomes are, that the rest of it's all junk DNA left over from our so-called evolution from the goo. But what they're finding out now is that there's no such thing as junk DNA, because there are a lot of control factors in that portion of DNA that tells where the parts go and where the machines are supposed to carry this particular part to repair some protein damage or whatever. And when the DNA is replicated, it's spinning at 15,000 RPM. And you'll see that in the video clip. It gathers up these amino acids. There are about 200 amino acids in nature, and the body only uses 20 of them for life. And they're all what they call left-handed amino acids. That just means that they're structured in a natural environment. You get both kinds, evenly mixed. But the body only uses left-handed. That means that polarized light passing through a solution of amino acids, it will rotate the vertical slit of light toward the left, just because of the arm sticking out on one side of that amino acid. If it's a right-handed amino acid, it rotates the polarized light toward the right. That's where it gets its name, all right? Just depending, but they're mirror images of each other. But the body only uses left-handed amino acids. Now, those get put together in a code, and the DNA is the most complex three-dimensional code in the known universe. Very, very compact. You've got 6 feet of it. If you took a 2-millimeter piece of DNA and translated it into books, your stack of books would go from the Earth to the Moon and back 400 times, just with a 2-millimeter piece. If you took the 6-foot length of DNA and translated it to books, it would go out into space. The stack of books would go out into space 347 light years. And each light year is 5.9 trillion miles times 347. That's a big stack of books. And it's filled with information. And the question that has not been answered now, where does the information come from to generate these organisms and all these parts that make things work? You see, natural selection and mutations do not add information. They destroy the information that's already there. They've never found any information-generating accidents in biosystems. So these things are designed and built to be able to diversify in nature depending upon the environment and such, if it changes. So let's take a look at what it looks like inside the cell through computer graphics.
The innermost workings of how a simple code is turned into flesh and blood. This is what Francis Crick called the central dogma of modern biology: how DNA makes protein. It starts with a bundle of factors assembling at the start of a gene. It's these that trigger the first phase of the process, reading off the information that will be needed to make the protein. The gene is the length of DNA stretching away to the left. Everything's ready to roll. 3, 2, 1. The blue molecule racing along the DNA is reading the gene. It's unzipping the double helix and copying one of the 2 strands. The yellow chain snaking out of the top is a copy of the genetic message, and it's made of a close chemical cousin of DNA called RNA. The building blocks to make the RNA enter through an intake hole. They are matched to the DNA, letter by letter, to make an exact copy of the A's, C's, G's, and T's of the gene. The only difference is that in the RNA copy, the letter T is replaced with a closely related nucleic acid known as U. You are watching this process, called transcription, in real time. It's happening right now in almost every cell in your body. When the RNA copy is complete, it snakes away from the nucleus and into the outer part of the cell. Then, in a dazzling display of choreography, all the components of another molecular machine lock together around the RNA to form a miniature factory called a ribosome. It translates the genetic information in the RNA into a string of amino acids that will become a protein. Special transfer molecules, the green triangles, bring each amino acid to the ribosome. The amino acids are the small red tips attached to the transfer molecules. There are different transfer molecules for each of the 20 amino acids. They all carry a specific 3-letter code that will be read by the machine. Now we come to the heart of the process. Inside the ribosome, the RNA is pulled through like a tape. The code for each amino acid is read off, 3 letters at a time, and matched to 3 corresponding letters on the transfer molecule. When the right transfer molecule plugs in, the amino acid it carries is added to the growing protein chain. Again, you are watching this in real time. And after a few seconds, the assembled protein starts to emerge from the ribosome. Ribosomes can make any kind of protein. It just depends what genetic message you feed in on the RNA. In this case, the end product is hemoglobin. The cells in our bone marrow churn out 100 trillion molecules of it per second.
100 trillion per second. Now, if we were to enlarge that process to something that we could understand, the nucleus of the cell could be the size of a soccer ball. The strand that you are splitting apart to read on a particular section of that strand of DNA could be like a small monofilament fish line, almost as thin as a human hair. Imagine yourself inside the soccer ball with an X-Acto knife, and this strand of DNA is 125 miles long. So that's the ratio we have here, relationship of size. Soccer ball to 125 miles. Now, you don't just have one strand of DNA in your body. You got many strands in your code. And they're spinning at 15,000 RPM, 3 times the speed of an airplane propeller. And yet your job is to split that hair-thin strand down the center and replicate half of it with a mirror image so that when it goes out to the ribosome, it can re-replicate back to what the original pattern was. You never take the original data out of the safe, the nucleus. It stays inside. It's too valuable. But you notice how the narrator, whoever wrote this, said, through a dazzling display of choreography. Did you catch that? Sounds very poetic, doesn't it? But that's a way of getting around explaining how it happens, because nobody knows how it happens. These nanomachines are moving these things around inside the cell. And they move so fast that, for example, a little bacterium with a flagellar motor spinning, that motor spins at 100,000 RPM. It can stop on a quarter of a turn and reverse direction and start up 100,000 RPM in the opposite direction. Tremendous energy down there at that little motor to get that thing to run. And that energy comes from adenosine triphosphate, ATP. That's the energy molecule of the body. And every one of your cells has ATP generators in it. That's the smallest molecular motor that they know about so far. It spins at 10,000 RPM and creates 3 ATP molecules every rotation. And your body creates half its weight in ATP every day and burns it up, just trying to stay alive. Half your weight. That's why early in the morning, before we even get up, the motors start ramping up to speed. Of course, the byproduct of burning is CO2 and water. So that's why usually when you wake up in the morning, you've got to get rid of that water, that excess water. Okay? ATP, very critical. They have ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That last bond breaks, tremendous energy given off to operate the cell. Those of you that are marathon runners, you realize after about 15 miles of your 26-mile run or whatever it is, you come to a wall. You just can't go any further. You've used up the ATP. And then your body breaks off the second molecule, ADP, adenosine diphosphate. You don't get as much energy, but you get enough energy for your second wind. But that's where you got to stop, because when you get down to the monophosphate, and this happens to some people that are hiking up in the mountains, their body temperature lowers. And in fact, there was a very healthy health instructor that climbed Mount McKinley and died. They tried to warm her up. Everybody crowded around her trying to warm her back up again, but her body had gone through too much energy, and she died up on the mountain. ATP molecule, absolutely incredible and critical. Let's take a look at that, how that one is made in the body.
It's been called one of the wonders of the molecular world, an amazing nanoscale machine. ATP synthase is a high-tech micromolecular power generator inside the cells of your body. It generates adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, an energy molecule that provides fuel that every one of your cells needs to function. Without this fuel, your cells will cease operation, and so will you. ATP synthase works like a rotary engine. The barrel-shaped rotator is composed of 10 to 15 protein parts called subunits. The rotator spins around, transmitting mechanical energy into the drive shaft of the machine, which helps make ATP. This drive shaft has a specially placed bump that opens and closes parts as the drive shaft spins around. This bump opens special protein subunits on the bottom of the machine. When the bottom subunits open, a spent energy molecule called adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, enters the machine. The mechanical motion causes the ADP to bind with an additional phosphate group, creating the ATP energy molecule. And the ATP drifts off into the cell, ready to power some biomechanical reaction. The ATP synthase machine has many parts we recognize from human-designed technology: a rotor, a stator, a drive shaft, and other basic components of a rotary engine. The ATP synthase is one of thousands of elegantly designed molecular machines inside your cells that make your life and all known life possible. ATP synthase, an example of intelligent design.
I think that's just amazing what's going on there. Now, ATP. First of all, he mentioned that it's an absolutely critical molecule. You can stop the function of ATP with cyanide. That's how cyanide works. It turns off the ATP motor and you will die in 30 seconds. Every cell in your body suffocates and turns itself off. You can take certain chemicals and mix them together with low energy, and once they're mixed together, maybe adding a little heat to get the matrix to work, let it dry out, But then when you activate that chemical, it releases tremendous energy. Just like black powder, you mix sulfur, potassium nitrate, and a carbon together. Simple substances you find, just mix it together. But when you set it off, you'd better duck, right? Tremendous energy release. And that kind of stuff goes on in the body all the time. But you need programmed machines to be able to run this stuff. And what's amazing is the information to build the machine to read the DNA is on the DNA itself. The easiest way that I can put this together to understand, help us understand it, now we know history. A little more than a couple hundred years ago, there was a dentist that made false teeth out of wood. His name was Paul Revere. And there was a time when Paul Revere went racing through the villages along with his partner that most of us don't remember his name. And he was shouting something. What was he yelling? The British are coming. How did he know that? Do you remember the signal? 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Now, the only thing anyone else would have known is that some guy climbed a ladder into a belfry and didn't fall off the ladder, and he was carrying lanterns up there. The difference with Paul Revere, though, is that that particular signal had an informational component to it, and he knew what it meant. He read the information, acted on it, and took off. So you cannot just have a complex arrangement of chemicals and think that it means something. It doesn't, unless you have the code and the code reader to read the data. And that's something that is totally missing from today's philosophy of how we got here. Creation and evolution, they're both based on faith because no one was back there when it started. So don't be overwhelmed by the people in the white coats or those that seem to have a lot of authority when they tell you something, because they will skip over some of the steps by saying a dazzling choreography of a dance. You know, wow, that sounds nice, but it doesn't explain anything. Laws of nature, and there's a law in the Scripture that says, be sure your sin will find you out. The law of sin and death. The soul that sins must die. The wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal life through the person of Jesus. All right? That's one of the spiritual laws. God knew we'd mess up. We're not perfect. Something happened a long time ago with our first parents, and everything since then has been broken. So, God had this plan figured out, just like he did with all the animals. He's got all these machines and all this data built in, so when something goes wrong, it can be fixed and save the animal's life. Protect it from its predators, for example. Winter comes, a nice brown coat on the rabbits, that's not going to help, is it? And they'll lose that coat and end up with white fur, camouflage in the snow. That stuff is pre-programmed. Natural selection does work in the sense that it removes brown rabbits on white snow. Okay? Nothing wrong with natural selection. We see it all the time. A mutation? Sure, mutations happen. Look at the diseases we're getting now based on environmental pollution and such. If you throw a monkey wrench into some fine Swiss watch, it's not going to work like it did before. So those two operatives do not ever and have never created new information. And that's the approach that many creationists are using to try to help their evolutionist colleagues and friends realize, you know, there's something behind this that we're not talking about, or we're not allowed to talk about. You're either ridiculed, you don't have a platform anymore. you are demonized and made to look so foolish that nobody will listen to you. And that happens all the time. People lose their jobs, they lose their careers, they lose their funding for their research just because they mention something that somebody said about intelligent design. So we do not have the freedoms that you should have in the intellectual environment, in academia. It's not there. They will say it is, but it's not there. Right? So laws of nature, those are just as fixed and certain and sure as are the spiritual laws. And if we break the spiritual laws, we'll break our necks, just like the chemist. When the chemist goes blooey through the roof, follows God's laws all the way up. F equals ma. Force equals mass times acceleration. Okay? So what I would hope you'd see after tonight's program, you cannot trust your senses. There was a movie sometime back in 1977 called Star Wars. You know, I love science fiction stuff, but these days they're starting to get a little weird with the occult stuff and weird stuff. It's not as fun anymore. I used to like science fiction that was at least plausible, but not with the weird stuff. But that movie was made by a Zen Buddhist, and they trust their feelings. If it feels good, do it. You know, it's not going to hurt anybody. Between consenting adults and all that nonsense. And you remember when that young guy was flying his X-Wing fighter toward the Death Star, and he heard this voice from his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he said, "Luke, turn off your brain." You know, they didn't say that, but that's what he was implying. Turn off your computers. Trust your feelings. And he, you know, okay, I'll do this. And he trusted his feelings. Oh, I hope I'm going to hit that target. And boom, it blew up the Death Star. Wow, my feelings work, you know. They won't, folks. You trust your feelings, and you'll get running down the rabbit trails and off axis and all. They're kind of lying to young people. And because the movies look cool and it's exciting and all that, people are believing this stuff. You don't trust your feelings. You've got to go back to the reference standard that we have, the scriptures, and trust that, because the creator of the universe wrote this book, B-I-B-L-E, Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth. That's how you remember it. Because, you know, this isn't our home, folks. When this carbon-based bipedal bag of ambulatory protoplasm stops working, what's really you will go on living forever. C.S. Lewis once said, "I've yet to meet a person who's not an immortal." Everyone's going to live forever, because that's you're made in God's image, and God doesn't die, and neither will you. But another term for death is a separation, either separation from the body, that's the first death. The second death is separation from the Creator, because nothing that is imperfect could ever defile heaven. And something's got to be done about that problem. And God's taken care of it, because He who knew no sin came to this planet, lived the perfect life that we couldn't live, died in our place, and exchange His perfect life for ours, and says, "Will you trust me with your soul's eternal destiny?" Let me close with a true story that happened a number of years ago. During World War I, this man became a fighter ace. Shot down at least 5 aircraft. Lived up into World War II. A little after World War II, this young couple had just gotten married. They were having their honeymoon out on the East Coast, and they went out on a wharf and watched the seagulls and the fish and such. And this little old guy goes creaking along out on the wharf, you know, had his cane, walked over to the shrimp salesperson, bought a big bag of jumbo shrimp, went out to the end of the wharf and started throwing the shrimp up to the seagulls, the scavengers. And they watched him do this, and they thought, you know, crazy old coot, you don't, it's expensive shrimp, you don't throw that to seagulls. It was on a Thursday night, I think, Thursday or Friday night. And they were there for a couple of weeks, and well, the next week they happened to have that same time off. They went out to the pier again, and here's that crazy old guy walking down that pier, goes over to the shrimp guy, buys the bag of shrimp, goes out in the end and starts flinging it up to the gulls. Well, they couldn't stand it anymore. They go over and talk to the shrimp salesperson and say, who is that old codger that, was he crazy? And he says, don't you know who that is? That's Eddie Rickenbacker, World War I fighter ace. He was training his crew during World War II. They had engine trouble and they had to ditch at sea. And he and his crew members were floating at sea for over a month. And they had been becalmed. They had a little raft they were floating in. They were hoping to get moved into the shipping lanes to be rescued. But they were there for over a month. They ate all their food. The water was gone. They were dying of exposure. And Eddie was leaning up against an oar that they had stuck in the thing with a shirt on it to try to catch any breeze along to get them to blow into the shipping lanes. His guys were all sleeping, and Eddie was just there hoping they'd get rescued. And a seagull landed on his head. And he reached up very slowly and grabbed it by its legs, wrung its neck, and the guys all pulled the feathers out of that thing and sucked a little drop of tissue off the end of the feather, threw it away. Then they ripped the skin off, ate the skin, they ate the guts, they ate the meat. Everybody took a piece of this bird. They ate the webbing between the toes and then stripped off the skin and ate that. Sucked the marrow out of the bone, the ones that weren't hollow. And that seagull saved their lives. And Eddie committed once a week to go out to the pier and feed the gull's descendants that saved his life and the life of his men, honoring those gulls because one of them died for Eddie and his crew. Now, if he could have that much care for a bird, how much more should we be grateful to the Lord himself who died in our place? While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Nobody can ever get good enough to earn something like that, because he was perfect. But God made him imperfect because he dumped our garbage on him and took his life and transferred it to our account. So when God sees you or me, he sees the life that Jesus lived in our place, and he can accept us. Legal terms used there. He died in our place. That's what salvation's all about. And you can be adopted into God's family based upon what somebody did for you. A legal transaction. Now, it cost Jesus his life to rescue you and me. So I would hope if you're curious about these things, maybe you haven't heard this stuff before. But there are laws in nature and there are laws in the spiritual realm. And if you break either one of them, tragic consequences. Don't let that happen, okay? Today is the day of salvation. Let's just close in a quick prayer and we'll turn it back to our pastor. Lord, we thank you for this unusual information that you've saved for us and revealed to us. We trust that you would open our hearts and our minds as your Spirit draws us closer to you. Lord, help us to believe, just like the